Hi, my name is Clare and I'm the mother of 3 teenagers with FASD.
I'm Jessica, a PhD researcher specialising in educational interventions for children with FASD.
And together we are the hosts of Spotlight on FASD, the UK's first podcast dedicated to shining a spotlight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders.
FASD is a condition caused by prenatal alcohol exposure that affects hundreds of thousands of children across the UK.
And we're here to bring these conversations out of the shadows and make sure that no one living with FASD feels alone. Hi and welcome back to Spotlight on FASD. This week is a very exciting episode. It's all linked to our education programme, our education season. This is an episode very, very close to my heart because we're going to be talking to 2 people who changed the lives of my family. So I've got a real vested interest in this. We're going to be speaking to Diego and Brian from Nudge Education. Diego is the CEO of Nudge and Brian is a managing director. And I'm going to hand over to you two because you are best placed to explain what Nudge Education is.
Thank you very much. I probably indirectly changed or imparted whatever it is change that you think. It's very kind of you to say that, and if we did have that impact on your family, we're very, very pleased to hear that, aren't we, Brian? It's
a lovely way to start a day, hearing that you've changed the life of a child.
Yeah,
I feel very
an entire family.
No, and it is cool. It's in my travels across the country, I get to hear a lot of these stories. But it's not me. It's the family of us out there, bringing a lot of hope and to lives that have been actually pretty much forgotten about. So, thanks. What is Nudge Education? Nudge Education was a really rough diamond, a really rough set of painful experiences that evolved into this wonderful movement of like-minded professionals. And it was rough because I found myself, in trouble with all kinds of senior leadership teams in schools, and then, within the mental health world, just banging on that door, thinking that there was a group of people, of students, of young people that were not being seen or heard, and they were eventually falling through the cracks of a system that meant really, really well, and they were doing really, really well with a number of other children, but were accidentally neglecting this whole entire group of people that could fill up 2-3 stadiums, depending on the size of the stadium that you're looking at. We're looking at something anywhere between 50 and 100,000 young people. We've then come to understand that as a group of young people who are chronically disengaged. And the word chronic for us means it's a complex set of issues. It's not just a mental health or a behavioral issue or any of those blanket type of titles that we give to people that are our students to signify that they're a bit different and they require a bit of extra help. These are complex, long-term sort of complex cases that resulted in fracturing away from the education sector in a way that they've lost that very essence of childhood, which is the essence of imagining a life worth living. I want to become a train driver, a bricklayer. I want to fly the moon. I want to, have 20 dogs and name them all the same name. Whatever it is, they forgot that ability to be children and to enjoy life, which I had a great childhood. So Nudge Education exists very simply to leave no child behind. And at the moment, what we've got is a mission to eradicate chronic disengagement from the face of the education sector, a child at a time. And we had no idea how much of a need that would have been. And now we've got over 150 practitioners on our team. We've got, a total caseload of 140 plus children across the country, working from the Scottish borders all the way down to Brighton, if you think of that breadth. Even recently with some some referrals from Geneva and so on. But it's exactly that emphasis of giving children and young people the chance, children and young people who've become chronically disengaged from a very rich social ecosystem that is the education system, provides you with all kinds of skills and opportunities, giving those guys who are not there the chance to imagine a life that is worth living in, and eventually reintegrate back into a permanent place of education, whatever that looks like for each of them. So, and then the other thing that Nudge Education is just a big, very exciting family of professionals who, for some reason, seem to kind of own elements of what we do. So I keep saying to Brian all the time, you know, one of the things I'm really determined to tell people at the moment is that this isn't ours. This was already there. When I talk to people, it was already there in their hearts, in their minds, in their common sense, in their professional expertise. Of course, it makes complete sense to align a professional with a child, because actually what we know about human conductivity is that it takes one to get to know one in some ways. You know, it takes a particular type of individual. It isn't about the, you know, I guess the masters in education and the PGCEs only. That is really important because it helps us, you know, understand how to use our tools, but it's about that ability to connect with a child in a particular way that some people may not have. So it is also a family of like-minded professionals that actually are changing the face of the education sector at the moment for good, and doing that a child at a time. So long-winded sort of answer, but that's what Nudge Education really is, and it's evolving and it's changing all the time. Does that make sense?
It does, totally. But we've had this conversation a couple of times, and you're adamant that it was already there. You didn't really do anything, it was already there. But that really is selling yourself short, because yes, the capability for professionals to have that interaction and make that difference with children's lives was there, but nobody had created it. Nobody had brought it together.
Yeah.
Until you both did. So.
Yeah, if you reflect on that, I'll let you and Brian discuss what your first meeting was like. It was magical, wasn't it? Because it was
yeah.
like,
yeah.
What was it like?
So this is this is the next part. So that was Nudge Education. Nudge Education existed. This is where I kind of slot into the jigsaw. I was desperate. I certainly had one child who had a very calm conversation with me, asking me, so not a, oh, I wish I was dead kind of a conversation, but just very calmly and very genuinely asking me what the point of their life was. Couldn't really understand the point of their life, and they didn't think it would make a difference if they didn't really have a life, if they weren't here. And what exactly the essence of what you've just said, there wasn't a life worth living there. There was the education system that I'd been trying to cram him into had extinguished him, just extinguished his little spirit. And I stumbled across Nudge Education at about 3 a.m. on one of me sleepless nights, where I was desperate that I knew there had to be something, and I followed a thread on some online forum, and I seen someone saying, have you ever heard of Nudge Education? They're really good. So I'm constantly Googling everything, Nudge Education. And then I seen that it was kind of based in the northeast of England. So I had a little bit of a read about it. And Brian, if we probably trail back my very first email, it'll be at about 3:45 in the morning. I emailed the inquiry, and this was the start of it for me. This was the point at which I knew I'd stumbled across something that I wanted to be part of, because one of the first things you said to me, so you all know what I'm like about trauma-informed service, trauma-informed care. One of the first things that you come back to me with, and you were the only education professional who had ever done this and ever used this language, and you weren't even making an effort to do it. It was just instinctively what you were. You asked me, you said, right, let's arrange to meet up. Come and tell us your boy's story. Tell us his story. Tell us what's happened. And you were the only person in education who wanted to know what had happened to him and his complex situation. And it wasn't this is what we can offer, this, and this. Which one does he fit in? It was none of that. Tell me his story and let's take it from there. And And that straight away, to me, that got us really excited, because I knew the kind of people I was dealing with then. So I came in and told you the story, and I probably haven't, that was nearly 3 years ago now, and I probably haven't stopped talking at you since.
It's very welcome though, because now you're the kind of person, you are the person that sort of keeps us in check on this sort of thing. So it's good that the relationship has evolved to the point where, you know, we work very closely professionally, and obviously on a personal level, we've become, you know, close to your family network as well, because we've worked with all three of your children at some point during the last 3 years. And I think it's interesting. I mean, actually 3 years ago, there's a good chance, because my daughter was a very small baby at that point, I could have probably replied at 3:45 in the morning as well, if there's during the night to feed.
Sleep deprived.
And I think the one thing we found when we started nudge education up was we had no idea what we were doing. We obviously, this is the thing, we knew something was there. We knew that there was an opportunity to help a wide range of young people, but we never had experience of running a business before, or running an organization that would engage with wider professionals. We came from two very different worlds. And when we first sort of started putting things together, it was almost like we were trying to pitch to, you know, local authorities and parents about what it is we thought they needed. And actually, quite quickly, we learned that the easiest, and it wasn't us, it was a coach friend of ours, Philip, who'd said, you just got to find out how you can help. You know, that's the easiest question. Don't assume you know what you know. Ask them what they need, what the parents and communities need, and that's what we started doing. And we find that, you know, we've worked with sort of over 300 young people across the country now, and every time we start a conversation by asking how we can help, and generally that's how you get to the root of the problem. So when we had that initial conversation, Claire, was that's the route you want to go down, because the thing we find is, even if a child has something like an education healthcare plan, sometimes that is written at a time when that child was going through a certain period, or they hadn't started showing symptoms of things, or whatever it might be. So actually what we need is the most up-to-date information possible, and we're better to get that from the person who spends every waking hour. And, you know, that waking hour is probably more than the average person, because obviously we know that sleep patterns can be really affected by conditions such as FASD. So yeah. And the interesting thing is, I kind of knew, you know, there's always a certain energy about parents who are, you know, fighters in this way. You know, there's a lot of parents who've been beaten by the system, and I know, you know, it runs you close sometimes in terms of how hard it is to get the support you need. But when we meet somebody like you, Claire, it's like it's a breath of fresh air, because we know half of the battle is working with parents. So when you've got somebody who's really advocating every day and trying to find off the wall solutions, because we're not orthodox in what we do, we're not, you know, we don't fit in any specific category in terms of alternative provision. This is why we had to kind of invent the term of intervention service, because what it should be is a short section of a child's life. It's all contextual, because some children need longer than others, but certainly it won't be forever. But even the kind of, I knew what you were going through, because I think it took about 3 or 4 attempts to get you in the office first, because I think you were trying to sort out your middle child's schooling and getting them to and from. So that's another thing that we obviously try and help with as well. We know that we've got to be really flexible to the point where it might be kind of waiting outside your house for 3 hours until we can get contact, because there's something going on inside and you're not ready to answer the door yet. So we try to engage at the level that the family need us to engage at as well. We don't just demand you come to our office, or, you know, demand you stick to a time frame. If we need to do an initial assessment, it's, you know, 10 o'clock at night. We've done that before. We do it on weekends. We do that. You know, we have to do it from a soft play area, or we do it from, you know, inside a tent. You know, we've done that before, because that's what the child needs to engage with a professional at that point. So yeah, so that's kind of where we first met, I guess.
And I started talking to you about explaining about it was my eldest son that I was specifically talking about at the time, about what his diagnosis was. And you'd heard of FASD, you were aware of it, but you didn't really know very much about it. So, and I just absolutely knew, because of what I knew and because of what I knew your service was, I was just like, I can tell you, like, you've got a huge percentage of the kids that you're working with, they have it, probably all of them won't be diagnosed or might be diagnosed with something different, but you are working with it every day. Your service is going to be drenched with it. And so you need to know about it. And that really, really, when we started talking about things, you started thinking about some of the kids on your caseload, and you're like, oh, absolutely. And, you know, so, and we knew that it was inevitable that you were dealing with FASD. Your education experts were dealing with it every single day. So then we started to work together, and then, you know, I think we realised very early on that there was, well, I knew that there was no FASD education intervention. It just wasn't there. I've always been lucky enough to have really good relationships with schools, but I have had to drive everything myself, and it's exhausting, and it's too overwhelming, and it's too much responsibility. And I haven't encountered very few teachers and education professionals who don't want to just take everything that I'm giving them and put it into place. But the book always stops with me, and I think it kind of pricked your mind, and you were like, right, I absolutely need to speak to Diego about this, because this is something huge and this is something that's going on. And at that point we were talking about how there was going to be it was on the horizon that there was going to be some nice quality standards coming out, and so that the things were going to change legally when it comes to diagnosis, and then a consequent plan of support for children and young people. And, you know, I could see all of this happening because it was my life, and I could just see that you were best placed to help and to do something about this, because the whole attitude of there is no judgment from Nudge at all. And that's one of the hardest things of any SEN parent dealing with education. You constantly, and sometimes you maybe aren't being judged, but you feel like you are, and it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things I also say to people is that we are allies. We're allies for a life worth living. So we're not anti-education system. I mean, look at Jess and you, Brian, and you, Claire. We are absolute beautiful products of an education system that worked for us. Not only that, but we've collated like memories and experiences, and we've traveled abroad, and you know, we've had all this stuff. So it really is a fantastic thing, the education system. But I think one of the things that we do really well is this model of alignment between a particular professional and the child, that then enters into these pathways that is carefully managed by case managers and professionals, and a whole load of processes that it is pretty complex and pretty busy and intense, that results in children being able once again to have, I think the word is, it sounds really cheesy, it's healing, to have some of those fractures healed up. And what you find, though, really interesting, if you think about an organism, is that when you fracture away from something, it isn't just the part that is fractured away from that suffers, it's the part that remained incomplete that suffers too. So there is a lot of pain going around within professionals and parents of being fractured away from the main, you know. So the reason why it works for parents and it feels non-judgmental is because we are incredibly keen to make sure that we are allies with people, that we form alliances, that we actually were that kind of bond between all of these parts. So one of the stories I like to tell is it's a story of Jack and Mary Jane, if you let me do that. So it kind of explains the model very, very well. So you know, we got a phone call from a very prominent council in the northeast of England about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, maybe, Brian, I can't remember. And he said, look, we've got this boy. And we found out very quickly through social workers that Ofsted had been in and said, what about this boy? It's the forgotten thing, you see. It was so difficult to engage with this boy for a lot of the services in that particular council that it was forgotten. It becomes too difficult. And honestly, with the best intention of the world, I sympathize with those guys in local authorities. It's hard. Why? Because then what happened was, they told me this story. Said, well, we had a tutor go and meet with Jack, but with the greatest will in the world, and she was fantastic. And they went off on one telling how amazing Mary Jane was. Mary Jane had done really well with all these kids in school, and she was a really dedicated professional. She was doing fantastic. But she got to Jack, and that was a different kettle of fish. That was called chronic disengagement. That boy had been around the country in every potential secure unit you can imagine. That boy had witnessed his mum overdose in his living room, his dad be sent to jail. That's way before the age of 7. Then he was taken away and put with grandma and granddad. The bond begins to establish there. And then granddad dies, and that throws a whole load of trauma into the situation as well. And school just wasn't understanding that those erratic behaviors and the curiosity about climbing was a particular way of communicating some of those pains that he was going through. On top of, and I know Jesse and you, Claire, you're the experts in this field, the potential for that FASD there. If there was potentially drug abuse, there was obviously potential for alcohol abuse, and there are potentially crossovers in those things, as you guys know very well, between the two realms of use. But anyway, so they said, can you do something with this boy? It's often the case for those wonderful human beings that I am so affectionately close to, that particular sort of a group of students. And as I said with everybody, and Jess knows this, you will explain what you do in a minute, Jess, I'm pretty sure. Nudge, there's only one word, or maybe 3 after that one word. The first word is yes. The second sentence is whatever it takes. So we thought, yes, let's do this. So I went to meet him, and it was lovely. We went for a sausage roll, and he liked my car at the time. Had some really cool, potentially offensive music being played very loud in very quaint area of the northeast of England, where they have alpacas and whatnot, and people are looking at me. But I let go of that, and I just embraced that I was there for that child. And I realized that he didn't need Mary Jane, because Mary Jane would show up with worksheets, and worksheets that were actually geared to work with Jack. With Jack in that way, let's say the Jack liked monkeys, she'd bring monkey pictures and whatnot. But what Jack really could have done with, if it was monkey that he wanted, was to hold one. That would have been the dream. But anyway, fast track. A couple of weeks later, it takes about a couple of weeks for us to turn things around in some cases. A couple of weeks later, we deployed this guy, this ex-head teacher, who worked in schools, who had left the education sector because he had his own turmoil in his life to do with his personal life and marriage and everything else, and that guy had experienced seclusion and exclusion, and being asked to let go. But also he was a pretty darn good carpenter. And so he shows up, having read the profile and having had a conversation with me, and said, oh, this boy will love anything to do with petrol and engines. It's like, yeah, absolutely. This boy can come into your house, take your car and bring your car back, and you will never even know. So that boy was tenacious. He was intelligent. Give him a screwdriver and a hammer, and you fix every bit of your car, and you take every part of your car apart. You do all this. So the boy is talented. So Arthur decided that for the first meeting, he'd bring a whole load of plywood and a petrol chainsaw. Think about outside the box and the alignment of those two professions in those minds. Most people would flinch at the idea of doing that with a boy who has a huge criminal record. But I tell you what, they built a shed and an extension to that shed, days after, and a go-kart. And then he smashed the shed at another episode. And guess what they did? They repaired that shed. And throughout that shed process, they had to read manuals and figure out numbers. So that boy, who was 15 at the time, had the reading age in our assessment of a 9-year-old. He actually had some numeracy skills of a 11-year-old. So he was falling majorly behind. But he was also never really invited to consider the potential of a professional in those things that he was doing, building stuff, mechanical. And that's exactly what they did. So fast track to 8 months only of interventions. That boy then, went to a college, to do some kind of mechanical course. I can't even remember the amount of stuff that they built. Yes, he got lots and lots of work done, but his literacy and numeracy skills went up to his level, and it is a success story. Of course, it is. And probably 98% of our stories are success stories. I can tell you this, and our data will prove that. But the most interesting thing that came out of that particular intervention wasn't the literacy levels being raised or the numeracy levels, getting to a good standard and all the stuff they built. That boy really found the zest for life again. It wasn't about being chased by police. It was about building stuff. He didn't use the word stuff, let's put it like this. So building good, and that is the beauty of it. But guess what happened as well? Arthur, this particular professional of ours, who's still very much connected to us, he tells you, and he wrote to us, didn't he, Brian? He wrote this beautiful letter. He said, you restored my faith in education again. But it wasn't us, Nudge. It was that connectivity between the two individuals that was so magical. And he went back to teach. He went back to be a head teacher. And the similarities of those two stories, paradoxical as they may be, is what makes Nudge education really beautiful and really unique. And we take that really seriously. And it is not very common to do this within the sector, that we must uphold that distance as professionals to talk about love and affection and the two-way change that goes on. But I guess it is powerful, that model of alignment with a really clear pathway around personal development and then academic work, and the liberty to go with and be modeled by the autonomy that we give to those students and the status that we allow them to have, and how that's actually literally changing lives. And that's just one story. 2 years ago, I can tell you about 100, at least 100, or 275, which is the amount of stories that we've got in our table. But anyway, so it's over to you guys again.
It's true, though. Everything about Nudge is about trauma, and it's about healing trauma, because every child who we help is dealing with some kind of relational trauma, whether it be within their family, whether it be within the education system, or the relationships have broken down. And the only way to heal relational trauma is through relationship. It is the only way that it's possible for a human to heal that. And that's exactly that is the only focus of Nudge, that relationship, and getting that relationship right.
There's a model to it. So, it's not, the other thing is we walk the talk, and I'm really serious about that. One of the things I say to my team, people who run Nudge education, if it isn't changing you, if it isn't uncomfortable somehow engaging with this work, there is something innately wrong about the way that you're engaging with it, because you're really facing with actually, and this is slightly deeper sort of talk, not very education interest me. I know a bit about education too, but this is about the realms of the human kindness that we've not yet allowed to come into given the, I guess the 1930s social care revolution where it all kind of came from. We've kind of neglected the fact that we love, we hurt, we get excited, and we find it annoying and find it difficult. And we are in this process of evolution as human beings that can't be solely supported by systems and processes. Mm-hmm. So we've got to somehow allow that to happen, that magic to happen. And there is a model to it. So, and then I find it interesting though, just finally, because in my conversations with Jess, early days, she was like, yeah, this is perfect for this group of people that you guys are concerned with, because it provides this autonomy and this flexibility. And I'm like, I had no idea, which is why we decided, Brian and I, to embrace FASD so intensely, because if we found that if there is a group of young people being left behind, given this particular condition, we must therefore respond to that. And then, Jess came on board quite quickly and quite swiftly, really, within. I think
that was it, wasn't it? Because obviously Claire being an advocate and working in the world, because what I've learned about FASD, it's a very small world. Everybody kind of knows everyone. and which is lovely because obviously that gives you a common bond and ability to share best practice. And one of the things that's really brought us on as an organisation is that Clare introduced us to Jess, who is, she's studying academic, doing a PhD within a subject which isn't, people didn't, there was no background to this. Obviously Canada are miles ahead and there's stuff around here, but there's no kind of practical application of the learning in a lot of cases. So when Jess came on board with Nudge, what we found is as well, even just things started to blow my mind, like the prevalence of, in comparison to other conditions that are heavily diagnosed in England, comparing FASD to potentially autism, my mind just started like spinning with the amount of kids that probably have been misdiagnosed or not diagnosed or are being given the wrong sort of intervention. And the thing that we try and focus on at Nudge is that we don't deal with the diagnosis, we deal with the child. So, a child with FASD is just one child with FASD. They'll be completely different. And even in your 3, Claire, very big differences between them all, apart from the one common bond that they have this, this birth, this cognitive damage, I guess, in terms of the FASD. So when we thought, well, actually, it could work both ways because, a lot of children we work with could probably have FASD. However, some of the strategies we use for children with FASD could work with children with, a wider range of developmental conditions. So, yeah, this is, I think, where we're getting to with this conversation is that, we're at an exciting juncture within all of our lives here that we're going to be working even closer together over the next sort of few years, really. So I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, and some big plans Jess has come up with. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that, Jess. I don't know if it's relevant for this, Claire, but
yeah, no, this is a bit weird, like, because Jess gets so sick of me just through our podcasts and like, right, stop talking now, let Jess speak. Jess is the brains behind the PhD around FASD. So yeah, you can now jump on to the next part of the story. So we've explained how we've all kind of magnetized towards each other. The universe have brought us all together, and now you can explain where we're headed now.
Yeah, I remember I kept seeing Nudge come up. I was on Indeed a lot, looking for, like, I was never ever in a job that aligned with my PhD, that just let me do what I knew I needed. I was just doing a job to earn the money while I did my PhD. So I was always on Indeed. And I just kept seeing Nudge come up again and again and again. And this name, this logo just kept appearing. And I remember I reached out to Brian on LinkedIn. And then it's like, God, surely these guys are working with tons and tons of kids with FASD. And I don't know if they're aware of it. And, this is really interesting to explore. And I messaged you, Claire, and said, oh, have you ever heard of this company? And you just sent me like the biggest, like, capital letters, bold message back to say yes.
Hello, I don't even know why I hadn't joined the dots. I got the message out of the blue. Have you heard of Nudge? And I was just like, oh my God, yes, that's where you need to be. You absolutely must be there. And then, well, the rest just unfolded, didn't it?
And we went for a meeting and had a chat about FASD. And obviously, like, Claire had already spoken to Brian by then and started talking about FASD as you've already explained. But yeah, and then I joined back in October, and we started talking about plans to set up something dedicated to children with FASD, children and young people with FASD, because there wasn't anything. And it was very much about, Nudge education, obviously working with children and young people with FASD already and doing a lot of great work. And this wasn't about changing what they were doing, but making sure that there was something bespoke there for all the parents like Claire who were up at 3 o'clock in the morning, desperately searching for something or somebody or a body of professionals who knew what their children were living with, who could help. And that's really where things are going with the FASD service that is being launched very soon with Nudge. And we are making sure that everybody who works with the children and young people with FASD are trained, very, very specifically trained in FASD and the strategies and everything, and have a really deep understanding of what it is that that these children need. You know, these are education experts who are already working with nudge. They've already got that passion, that understanding of everything that Diego and Brian have spoken about. We're just adding on top of that this bit of FASD knowledge, this little specific, it's not very little, but this specific building block around the brain damage, as it is, that can cause limitations in other areas. So really it's just about bringing everything together and making sure that there's something really, really bespoke, but flexible and accommodating and available for anybody with a diagnosis or not, whether it's, you know, we've spoken before about the challenges in diagnosis of FASD. So, you know, the labels aren't relevant. It's, if it's suspected, we're here. And, you know, we're looking to eradicate chronic disengagement from, you know, for all students. But as we've talked about, this is a very, very particular group who are underserved, who are hidden, who are forgotten. And I think what's interesting about this, what's brought us all together, is that we're actually all working really, really, really hard to make ourselves redundant. Like, and I don't think many people can say that. Like, what we all really, really, really want to do is to
finish it off.
to not have to do this.
And hand this all over to everybody else, you know, and let them do their own organizations or whatever it is. It has to be about a step change. It has to be, imagine though, Jess, looking back 10, 15 years time, you know, and thinking that those roads are led children with FASD down a path where they, like you said, Claire, where they just thought life was pointless. What if those roads were paved with swings and flowers and trees and birds and dinosaurs and skate parks and all of those sort of things that they love? Imagine if that was the, you know, the legacy that we left together, where those roads are now paved with beautiful things and will not lead down that dark alley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, will be some beautiful destinations there for everyone, for those with FASD.
And I think as well, one story last week, and you'll get a kick out of this, because I kicked myself really because why I didn't join the dots to think that potentially adoption agencies would also want to access this kind of service, because Claire, being the adoptive parent of 3 children with FASD, of course, there's going to be children in that system that will do it. And I was speaking to somebody from an adoption agency down south who connect us with a virtual school / children's services department, and they said, we started talking about this, about what we can do for young people, and they said, oh, do you do any sort of training around FASD, or do you work with kids with FASD? Because you know, this is thing. I said, well, as it happens, and before I even got the word out, she went, oh, do you know, have you heard of Spotlight on FASD? And I was like, maybe, yeah. And she said, oh, it's great. I burnt my dinner the other night, actually. I was that busy taking notes about things for a meeting the next day that actually I forgot I left the oven on. So I was like, and this is the thing that kind of struck. That was one person who had no real kind of connection. She might have had a bit of background inkling that we were kind of close, but certainly the amount of professionals in the industry. It was an interesting conversation we had, and there was one sentence that stuck out, was that we both sort of kind of came out at the same time and said, where we are with FASD now is probably where we were with autism maybe 30 to 40 years ago. And I think this opportunity to be at the forefront of helping and forming what this can be, using people who have got, and it's not just using one dimension, because obviously we've got the academic side with Jess and the lived side with Claire, and also we've Ilse, who's got, you know, a bit of both, I guess, up in a different area that's again further forward than England is. So yeah, I guess there's certainly a step change about to happen, and hopefully we're going to be able to support such a wide amount of not just children but families and professionals.
Yeah, and I know Claire says, you know, I do myself a disfavor, but listen to that story. It's already there. It's already there. We've just got to do the right things, or do whatever it takes to do it. And actually, I often ask people, though, I'm not sure if I can potentially around this sometime soon. But I'm just thinking, I often say to people, why do you think it matters that we do this? And most people go, oh, interesting question. I go, well, it's not interesting. It's fundamental in my head. And I think because if we look at, it sounds really weird and deep, but if you look at the history of the universe, right, whatever we think it happened, there was some particles that then got together, and then they said, let's form an atom, and an atom then form a cell, and a cell evolved all the way up to this point where we are. And consciousness is something that people say that can be shared through the lens of reality. The reason why it matters that we do this for those kids with FASD is because they are the pain of our pains, the hopes of our hopes, the cells of our cells, the love of our loves. We are all this together. And why would we leave them behind? It would be like leaving our humanity behind with them, which is why innately we are led to do something about it, which is why I'm telling you, it's already there. It's in the thread of that humanity. So it's fantastic to have you both really on board helping us do this. And you know, me and Brian, we do very little. I know you think I'm playing this down, but it is true. You guys are absolute blessings, really.
I think one of the things that I want to, because when it comes to parent and children with FASD, education is horrific. And that is a really appropriate word to use across the board. It is something that has to be survived, endured. It's awful. And no matter how much professionals try and get it right, a lot of the system just isn't catered to get it right. And I think what makes me so passionate about Nudge and about being involved in Nudge is you recognise the expertise of lived experience of the parents. And Brian referred earlier to I'm a little bit bossy and hold people to account, and you both recognised that and invited me to become the chair of your advisory board for Nudge Education. And that is, you know, we talk so much about the importance of co-production and about how involving lived experience and creating services is vital, but a lot of the time it's just lip service. It's a box that needs to be ticked, and when someone might do a survey with a couple of parents and yeah, that's all being co-produced, and that's not true. And at the heart of everything that you do, you have got lived experience now. And I think that, you know, so I've got none of the academic experience that you have and the professional experience with what you do, but I've got the right at the coal face, knowing exactly how things are going to translate. And
you know how it hurts, and you know how it's relieved, and you know how hopeful it can be when it happens. And I would have nobody else at the forefront of this organization that I lead that hadn't had that lived experience. In fact, I'd even argue, without going into detail, the majority of this awareness this organization holds and its culture comes from my own personal pain that, you know, led me to this particular point. So, like I said, it's all connected, and we want to make sure that nobody, like Jess said, who has a particular inclining that there's some FASD stuff going on, or that has been diagnosed, and it's wondering how on earth will this child ever live a life worth living, to not hang around and reach out to us, you know, and we'll do really whatever it takes. You know, and Jess is a living proof of it, because she's doing whatever it takes under some very busy circumstances at the moment to make sure that it happens. And yeah, and watch this space. It's great to be doing this. I mean, I wouldn't do anything else. People talk about a life worth living. I've been thinking a lot about a life worth leading these days. You know, it's like, what kind of life do I want to lead? Do you know what I mean? So it's got to be a good one. It's got to be a good one.
I think what I want to finish up with is just that I'm always speaking to the parents out there. That's who my voice is truly for. The people who are at the end of the tether, who are desperate, who've lost all hope. That this is you know, and a lot of the work that I'm doing now, I know that my children won't benefit from it, but I can't stop pushing because I can see what it's going to do for other children down the line. And you know, we want to create. There are no schools, physical buildings of schools that are suitable for children like ours, and that's something that pushes me to think, what's to stop us creating that? We need to create that. And that's what pushes me on all the time. And I just think that if anyone is struggling with education, like Diego said, Nudge is a nationwide organisation working with every local authority. If you think that Nudge can help your situation, then reach out, either through your school, if you've currently got a school, through your local authority, through your social worker, reach out, because it's life-changing. It is life-changing stuff.
And it's dead simple, honestly. And if you're out there thinking, I want to get involved, just get involved. Reach out.
The one thing, because again, we're learning about new stuff all the time, and again, it might not be applicable to everyone who's watching or listening to this, but we know that there's funding through adoption support funds to prepare for therapeutic respites. It could even be the case that, maybe you've got a child that's kind of just on the verge of being completely disengaged, that actually we could work with them during the summer, and just do some stuff. Like, we've got one young man down in the east of England who's going to be doing some kind of bushcraft things. And it doesn't cost a lot. So it's not like they're looking for, a year of support in a residential setting. This is short, sharp kind of interventions that help both the child and the parents as well.
So thank you very much. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
It's obviously something very, very close to all of our hearts, and I think that we couldn't have done our education season without talking about this. This is something that fuels Chip and I all the time. That you've given us the opportunity to channel our passion. You've given us that platform to be able to say, you basically, like you said earlier, you say yes, and then you go, right, how's this going to work? But you say yes.
We know. The thing is, somebody told me this before, and I've been telling everybody, if you are really going to halt certain systems, and it sounds terrible, that, doesn't it? But if you're really going to impart change into a particular part of our lives that we really need to do, you've got to be prepared to build the aircraft in the air. So you know what you're building. You just got to be prepared to take.
That's a description of my life. Just like my daily life.
I keep saying that to Jess all the time, Jess. It's there, Jess. It's just not. It's not quite there yet, but it's there.
Well, one last thing from me, and I just want to say how proud I am of the pair of you of managing to do this, because I know how hard it is to organise diaries. I know how hard it is to kind of keep things going when you've got multiple plates that are being smashed in midair as well, not just spinning. But the fact of the matter is, you are reaching people. I've spoken with one professional in the past week who knows, and they were told by somebody who's also in the field. So what you're doing is really making an impact in professionals as well. So yeah, well done for all this.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you, and thanks for listening. If anyone I'll put all the links to Nudge on our social medias, but also in the YouTube link. And if you think that Nudge can help, then reach out.
Mint.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for having you on a new podcast. See you soon.